hoc mort animat vertor, operor non timeo. Salus est proculmanus.
That was a bit nerve-wracking. A lot of people out on St. George Street. I really could not get my mind together. But anyway, what's up you guys? Chet-Guthrie the Dream Poet here, coming to you all with another road trip vlog here in the oldest city in America, St. Augustine, Florida. Now, as everybody would know, St. Augustine throughout its history has been predominantly influenced by Catholicism and the Spanish. But did you know there is actually a darker side behind St. Augustine? You see, people associate voodoo with New Orleans, Louisiana, and other parts of the coastal states here in the nearby areas. But St. Augustine has its own bit of voodoo history. And today, guys, we are going to explore those places. Now, some things are just merely fields. Some are just old buildings. But one we will be checking out is a cemetery. Yes, you guys, this is the Voodoo Cemetery of St. Augustine, Florida, and the other areas that are influenced by this mysterious religion that started in West Africa many, many years ago. Now, in order to explain the origins on how voodoo and hoodoo got into St. Augustine, Florida, it begins with this house right here and the man who once lived in it. And his name was Jorge Basu. You see, Jorge Basu, he was the first black general of the Spanish militia. And why he was so beloved by the Spanish militia is because he played a major role in the Haitian slave revolt, and he knew how to fight. He knew how to kill. He was a warrior. However, in order to be a part of the Spanish militia, you had to be Catholic. So Jorge Basu, he converts, he changes over to Catholicism, but his soldiers, his men, his women that followed, that came to this country, they didn't. You see, Haiti was a major practice point or practicing area for voodoo and hoodoo. So really, you have Jorge Basu to thank for how hoodoo and voodoo came to the oldest city in America. Now, did you also know Jorge Basu, he also owned a lot of land here. He also was in control of Fort Montanzas, which is about 3 miles that way. This board explains a little bit more on who Jorge Basu was. Anyway, this is just his history, and yeah, how his involvement or his influence in St. Augustine played a part. Now, this second place that I'm about to show you guys would look rather underwhelming if you didn't know what to look for, but it is also another major site for the voodoo and hoodoo history here in St. Augustine. Now, you all are probably wondering, Chet, what is the difference between hoodoo and voodoo? Well, essentially they are the same thing, but hoodoo is more southern, more lowland, I guess you could say. Voodoo is, I guess you would say, the more broader term. By the way, voodoo means spirit in the African language that it comes from. And this is the area right here. This parking lot here, dead in the center of town. But that is not what we are looking for. No, in order to explain the history of this site, we must turn the clock back about 300 years. Back to when the land looked much different. See, the land at the time, right here, this was all swampland. nothing was here except for maybe a shack. By the way, this was also the outskirts of town. Not many people came out here. And who lived in this shack on the outskirts of town, you might be asking? Well, she was a voodoo priestess. And now you might be asking, well, since St. Augustine is Catholic, doesn't that mean she should have been Catholic in order to live in the city? Which that is true. You see, in order to live in a Spanish town, you had to be Catholic. However, this voodoo priestess, she not only practiced in voodoo, but she was also a root worker. She was a medicine woman. Essentially, she was a pharmacist. People would come here when they were sick, whenever they were hurting or dying, what have you, and she would take care of them. And throughout her living years, this is why the city let her live in what is now this parking lot. And the strangest thing about this plot of land is that if you bring a K2 meter or divining rods as they're called, you will find that there is a lot of electrical activity going on in this spot. In fact, if you bring a K2 meter out here, it will spike and it will stay dead in the center. But here's the thing. The only way that a K2 meter would pick up anything electrical would have to be from those power lines or ground wire. The thing is, in order for a K2 meter to be set off by a power pole, you have to be right under it. Now, this also includes ground wire. Now, how I got to know a lot of this history is I used to be a guide for Ghost Augustine. But the thing is about ground wire, and this was confirmed to be by someone who was on my tour at the time. He was an electrician from the Tampa area. And anyway, he and his wife, it's only them. They bring, or I give them their K2 meters. They bring it to this spot, and that electrician, it takes him like 2 minutes and he is baffled. He can't figure out why his K2 meter is going off. He knows what they're used for. He has used them on the job site. But he could not get it to go down. It stayed in a constant spike. He said, with ground wire, that should not be happening. About the thickest thing that you would see from ground wire is, imagine my hand right here with another part of my hand. That's as bad as big of a ground wire as you're going to get. So again, why is there so much energy in this spot? Could it be that it sits on a fault line? Or maybe, is it because this was the site of a voodoo priest? Or could it be that this was the site of where a voodoo priestess lived? You be the one to make the decision on that. But anyway, you guys, we're going to the Voodoo Cemetery. Okay, now, after about a 30-minute walk, we have made it to the cemetery. Now, this cemetery in question is called the Pinehurst and San Sebastian cemeteries. Anyway, this cemetery originally was a Haitian slave cemetery. Some of these headstones date all the way back to the 1700s. Or, as this placard says, some of them dating back to the 1880s. Now, you will see that some of these have chains carved into the headstones. Now, what that indicates is that person was born a slave. And you will also see adornment of shells and planted ferns. Now, the Pinehurst and San Sebastian cemeteries never used to look this clean or this good. Actually, up until probably the last 3 or 4 years, it has looked very much gnarly. A lot of plants growing everywhere. It was kind of hard to get back into, and this has also kind of led to a lot of disagreements and of controversies. You see on the other side of that fence over there, that is the Evergreen Cemetery, and that is a predominantly white cemetery. And why I say that is in 2018 there was a major ruckus started to get this cemetery cleaned by the city. However, the city of St. Augustine said they quote unquote did not have the funds to clean it, but yet they had enough to clean the Evergreen Cemetery. But why it brings me to that is, but going back to what this cemetery used to look like when it was really overgrown. Again, Ghost Augustine used to give tours out here. They had permission. But one of the things that they kind of noticed is that the front gate right there, there was a doll in white clothing tied up in white linen on the gate. Now, initially that was believed to be a something associated with the occult. Ghost Augustine really didn't know what to think of it until a group of Haitian tourists had come here to St. Augustine. They went on the Everdark Express and they told them that that doll that was between these two gates right here, tying the gate up, was a voodoo, not necessarily a voodoo doll, but the doll was a representation of the good spirits protecting this cemetery and keeping the loved ones who are buried here safe. However, as more people started coming in here, well, one night, Ghost Augustine, they were here and they found a doll in black linens, a doll with black cloth wrapped around the fence. And later on, that was determined to be, well, darker entities, not necessarily protecting the graves, but rather to inflict harm on anyone that was doing injustice or anything, or any type of consecration to one of these graves. In fact, at one point, there was a pile of conch shells right there in the middle of the gate, or at the beginning of the gate. Now, it has been noted that people who have taken things from this cemetery have suffered a great deal of bad luck, often returning the items that they took as a souvenir back to this cemetery. Now, as I say, this is why I say it is a voodoo cemetery, or at least a lot of voodoo lore attached to it anyway. Like, for example, you have some of these older headstones with the name carved in it. Some people, well, I should say these headstones, which, well, up until like 2020, no one could really read their headstones because they had gotten so eroded. But anyway, it continues to go back further, and I think we're going to check out the other part, or the San Sebastian Cemetery. And now, one sad thing about this cemetery is when it went through all this neglect, this was also a site where drug dealers in the area would dump their victims. That happened more in the 1980s and 1990s. But the neighborhood has gotten better in the last few years, which is good. And I'm glad that people are taking the initiative to take care of these cemeteries, or these graves, because these people, they don't deserve to be forgotten. And as I'm talking, I want to tell you all a bit of a ghost story as we get to the far end. Way back when I started my YouTube channel, I came here and I did the Shadow Shuttle with my family as a vlog. But as we got here and I got closer and closer in, I saw what I could only describe as being a shadow figure. Now, this shadow figure, as I continued to walk closer and closer in, it's as if it would get closer to me. But it's strange because it was a shadow, but it was zigzagging back and forth as if it was almost animal-like, or at least that's the only way I could describe it. It zigzagged back and forth, but as I would leave, it would continue to come in. as I was, or I should say, pardon me, it would leave, but as soon as I would walk further in, it would try to follow me. But that is something that I have found interesting. Another instance of me seeing a shadow figure. I know that's not exactly everyone's cup of tea, but I wonder if we can find where any of these shackles were carved into the headstones. And this is what it says about the Pinehurst Cemetery. Pinehurst is believed the earliest segregated African-American cemetery in Florida, with graves dating back to the 1840s. Similar to San Sebastian, many veterans from the Civil War, World War II, and the Korean War laid to rest here peacefully. A lot of these graves are, well, yeah, a lot of these graves are thankfully being taken care of. Still, I'd kind of like to see, but one of the shackles was carved into the headstones, kind of showing, you know, what that person's life was like way back when. It's like that man's name was Robert Williams. But anyway, guys, as I'm sitting out here in the cemetery, this will be another vlog for another day. Remember, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon. Always means a lot. Goes to show that y'all care and that y'all want to see more awesome videos. So without further ado, you guys, vlog over.